The Adventurous Exploit of the Cave of Ali Baba by Dorothy L. Sayers. Read by Matthew Jones. In the front room of a grim and narrow house in Lambeth, a man sat eating kippers and glancing through the Morning Post. He was smallish and spare, with brown hair rather too regularly waved, and a strong brown beard cut to a point. His double-breasted suit of navy blue, and his socks, tie, and handkerchief all scrupulously matched, and were a trifle more point device than the best taste approves, and his boots were slightly too bright a brown. He did not look a gentleman, not even a gentleman's gentleman. Yet there was something about his appearance which suggested that he was accustomed to the manner of life in good families. The breakfast table, which he'd set with his own hands, was arrayed with the attention to detail which is exacted of good-class servants. His action, as he walked over to a little side table and carved himself a plate of ham, was the action of a superior butler. Yet he was not old enough to be a retired butler, a footman perhaps, who'd come into a legacy. He finished the ham with good appetite, and as he sipped his coffee, read through attentively a paragraph which he'd already noticed and put aside for consideration. Lord Peter Wimsey's will. Bequest to valet. £10,000 to charities. The will of Lord Peter Wimsey, who was killed last December while shooting big game in Tanganyika, was proved yesterday at £500,000. A sum of £10,000 was left to various charities, including— here followed a list of bequests. To his valet, Mervyn Bunter, was left an annuity of £500, and the lease of its estate as flat in Piccadilly. There followed a number of personal bequests. The remainder of the estate, including the valuable collection of books and pictures at 110A Piccadilly, was left to the testator's mother, the Dowager Duchess of Denver. Lord Peter Wimsey was 37 at the time of his death. He was the younger brother of the present Duke of Denver, who was the wealthiest peer in the United Kingdom. Lord Peter was distinguished as a criminologist, and took an active part in the solution of several famous mysteries. He was a well-known book collector and man about town. The man gave a sigh of relief. "No doubt about that," he said aloud. "People don't give their money away if they're going to come back again. The blighter's dead and buried right enough. I'm free." He finished his coffee, cleared the table, and washed up the crockery, took his bowler hat from the hall stand, and went out. A bus took him to Bermondsey. He alighted and plunged into a network of gloomy streets, arriving after a quarter of an hour's walk at a seedy-looking public house in a low quarter. He entered and called for double whisky. The house had only just opened, but a number of customers, who'd apparently been waiting on the doorstep for this desirable event, were already clustered about the bar. The man, who might have been a footman, reached for his glass, and in so doing jostled the elbow of a flash person in a check suit and regrettable tie. "Here," expostulated the flash person. "What do you mean by it? We don't want your sword here. Get out." He emphasized his remarks with a few highly coloured words and a violent push in the chest. "Pass free to everybody, isn't it?" said the other, returning the shove with interest. "Now then," said the barmaid, "none of that. The gentleman didn't do it intentional, Mr. Jukes." "Didn't he?" said Mr. Jukes. "Well, I did." "Then you ought to be ashamed of yourself," retorted the young lady with a toss of the head. "I'll have no quarrelling in my bar, not this time in the morning." "It was quite an accident," said the man from Lambeth. "I'm not one to make a disturbance, having always been used to the best houses. Although if a gentleman wants to make trouble—" "Oh, all right, said Mr. Jukes more pacifically. "I'm not keen to give you a new face. Not that but any alteration wouldn't be for the better. Just mind your manners another time, that's all. Will you have?" No, protested the other. This is on me. I'm sorry I pushed you. I didn't mean it, but I didn't like to be taken up so short." "Say no more about it," said Mr. Jukes generously. "I'm standing this. Another double whisky, miss, and one of the usual. Come over here, where there isn't so much of a crowd, or you'll be getting yourself into trouble again." He led the way to a small table in the corner of the room. "That's all right," said Mr. Jukes. "Very nicely done. I don't think there's any danger here, but you can't be too careful. Now, what about it, Rogers? Have you made up your mind to come in with us?" Yes, said Rogers with a glance over his shoulder. Yes, I have. That is, mind you, if everything seems all right. I'm not looking for trouble, and I don't want to get let in for any dangerous games. I don't mind giving you information, but it's understood I take no active part in whatever goes on. Is that straight? You wouldn't be allowed to take active part if you wanted to, said Mr. Jukes. Why, you poor fish, number one wouldn't have anybody but Express on his jobs. All you've got to do is let us know where the stuff is and how to get in. The society does the rest. It's some organisation, I can tell you. You won't even know who's doing it or how it's done. You won't know anybody, and nobody'll know you. Except number one, of course. He knows everybody. And you. And me, of course. But I shall be transferred to another district. We shan't meet again after today, except at the general meetings, and then we shall all be masked. Get on, said Rogers incredulously. Fact. You'll be taken to number one. He'll see you, but you won't see him. Then, if he thinks you're any good, you'll be put on the roll, and after that you'll be told where to make your reports to. There's a divisional meeting called once a fortnight, and every 3 months there's a general meeting and share-out. Every member's called up by number and has his whack handed over to him. That's all. Well, but suppose 2 members are put on the same job together. Well, if it's a daylight job, they'll be disguised so that their mothers wouldn't know them. But it's mostly night work. I see. But look here, what's to prevent somebody following me home and giving me away to the police? Oh, well, nothing, of course. Only I wouldn't advise him to try it. The last man who had that bright idea was fished out of a river down Rotherhithe way, long before he had time to get his precious report in. Number one knows everybody, you see. And who is this number one? Lots of people would give a good bit to know that. Does nobody know? Nobody. It's a fair marvel's number one. He's a gentleman, I can tell you that, pretty high up one from his ways. And he's got eyes all round his head, and he's got an arm as long as here to Australia. But nobody knows anything about him, unless it's number two. I'm not even sure about her. There are women in it, then? You bet your boots there are. You can't do a job without them nowadays. But it needn't worry you. The women are safe enough. They don't want to come to a sticky end, no more than you and me. But look here, Jukes. How about the money? It's a big risk to take. Is it worth it? Worth it? Jukes leant across the little marble-topped table and whispered. "Go!" gasped Rogers. "And how much of that would I get now?" "You'd share and share alike with the rest, whether you'd been in that particular job or not. That's 50 members, and you'd get 1/50th. Same as number one. Same as me." "Really? No kidding?" "See that wet? See that dry?" "Can you beat it? There's never been anything like it. It's the biggest thing ever known. He's a great man, is number one." "And you pull off many jobs?" "Many? Listen, you remember the Carruthers necklace, and the Gorleston bank robbery, and the Faversham burglary, and the big Rubens that disappeared from the National Gallery, and the Frensham pearls? All done by the Society, and never one of them cleared up." Rogers licked his lips. "But now, look here," he said cautiously. "Supposing I was a spy, as you might say. Supposing I was to go straight off and tell the police what you've just been saying." "Ah," said Jukes. "Suppose you did, eh? Well, supposing something nasty didn't happen to you on the way there, which I wouldn't answer for, mind. Do you mean to say you've got me watched?" "You can bet your sweet life we have." "Well, supposing nothing happened on the way there, and you was to bring the slops to this pub, looking for yours truly." "Yes?" "You wouldn't find me, that's all. I should have gone to number 5. "Who's number 5? I don't know, but he's the man who makes you a new face while you wait. Plastic surgery, they call it, and new fingerprints, new everything. We go in for up-to-date methods on our show." Rogers whistled. "Well, how about it?" asked Jukes, eyeing his acquaintance over the rim of his tumbler. "Well, look here, you've told me a lot of things. Shall I be safe if I say no?" "Oh, yes, you'll be safe enough if you behave yourself and don't make trouble for us." "If I say yes?" "If you say yes, you'll be a rich man in less than no time, with money in your pocket to live like a gentleman, and nothing to do for it, except tell us what you know about the houses you've been to when you were in service. It's money for jam, if you act straight by the Society." Rogers was silent, thinking it over. I'll do it. Good for you. Miss, same again, please. Here's to it, Rogers. Well, I knew you were the right sort the minute I set eyes on you. Here's to money for jam, and take care of number one. Talking to number one, you'd better come round and see him tonight. No time like the present. Right you are. Where'll I come to? Here? Nix. No more of this little pub for us. A pity, because it's nice and comfortable, but it can't be helped. Now, what you've got to do is this. At 10 o'clock tonight exactly, you walk north across Lambeth Bridge. Rogers winced at this intimation that his abode was known. You'll see a yellow taxi standing there with a driver doing something to his engine. You'll say to him, is your bus fit to go? And he'll say, depends where you want to go. And you'll say, take me to number 1, London. There's a shop called that, by the way, but he won't take you there. You won't know where he is taking you, because the taxi windows will be covered up. You mustn't mind that, it's the rule for the first visit. Afterwards, when you're regularly one of us, you'll be told the name of a place. And when you get there, you do as you're told and speak the truth, because if you don't, number 1 will deal with you, see? I see. Are you game? You're not afraid? Of course I'm not afraid. Good man. Well, we'd better be moving now. And I'll say goodbye, because we shan't see each other ever again. Goodbye. And good luck. Goodbye. They passed through the swing doors and out into the mean and dirty street. The 2 years subsequent to his enrolment of ex-footman Rogers in a crook society were marked by a number of startling and successful raids on the houses of distinguished people. There was the theft of the great diamond tiara from the Dowager Duchess of Denver, the burglary at the flat formerly occupied by the late Lord Peter Wimsey, resulting in the disappearance of £7,000 worth of silver and gold plate, the burglary at the country mansion of Theodore Winthrop, the millionaire, which incidentally exposed that thriving gentleman as a confirmed society blackmailer, and caused a reverberating scandal in Mayfair, and the snatching of the famous 8-string necklace of pearls from the Marchioness of Dinglewood during the singing of the Jewel Song in Faust at Covent Garden. It's true that the pearls turned out to be imitation, the original string having been pawned by the noble lady under circumstances highly painful to the Marquis, but the coup was nevertheless a sensational one. So, on a Saturday afternoon in January, Rogers was sitting in his room in Lambeth, when a slight noise at the front door caught his ear. He sprang up almost before it had ceased, dashed through the small hallway, and flung the door open. The street was deserted. Nevertheless, as he turned back to the sitting-room, he saw an envelope lying on the hat-stand. It was addressed briefly to number 21. Accustomed by this time to the somewhat dramatic methods used by the Society to deliver its correspondence, he merely shrugged his shoulders and opened the note. It was written in cipher, and when transcribed ran thus. Number 21. An extraordinary general meeting will be held tonight at the house of number 1 at 11:30. You will be absent at your peril. The word is finality. Rogers stood for a little time considering this. Then he made his way to a room at the back of the house, in which there was a tall safe built into the wall. He manipulated the combination, and walked into the safe, which ran back for some distance, forming, indeed, a small strong-room. He pulled out a drawer marked Correspondence, and added the paper he'd just received to the contents. After a few moments he emerged, reset the lock to a new combination, and returned to the sitting-room. Finality, he said. Yes, I think so. He stretched out his hand to the telephone, then appeared to alter his mind. He went upstairs to an attic, and thence climbed into a loft close under the roof. Crawling among the rafters, he made his way into the farthest corner, then, carefully, pressed a knot on the timberwork. A concealed trap-door swung open. He crept through it, and found himself in the corresponding loft of the next house. A soft cooing noise greeted him as he entered. Under the skylight stood 3 cages, each containing a carrier pigeon. He glanced cautiously out of the skylight, which looked out upon a high blank wall at the back of some factory or other. There was nobody in the dim little courtyard, and no window within sight. He drew his head in again, and taking a small fragment of thin paper from his pocket-book, wrote a few letters and numbers upon it. Going to the nearest cage, he took out the pigeon and attached the message to its wing. Then he carefully set the bird on the window ledge. It hesitated a moment, shifted its pink feet a few times, lifted its wings, and was gone. He saw it tower up above the already darkening sky over the factory roof and vanish into the distance. He glanced at his watch and returned downstairs. An hour later he released the second pigeon, and in another hour the third. Then he sat down to wait. At 9:30 he went up to the attic again. It was dark, but a few frosty stars were shining, and a cold air blew through the open window. Something pale gleamed faintly on the floor. He picked it up. It was warm and feathery. The answer had come. He ruffled the soft blooms and found the paper. Before reading it, he fed the pigeon and put it into one of the cages. As he was about to fasten the door, he checked himself. "If anything happens to me," he said, "there's no need for you to starve to death, my child." He pushed the window a little wider open and went downstairs again. The paper in his hand bore only the two letters OK. It seemed to have been written hurriedly, for there was a long smear of ink in the upper left-hand corner. He noted this with a smile, then put the paper in the fire, and going out into the kitchen, prepared and ate a hearty meal of eggs and corned beef from a new tin. He ate it without bread, though there was a loaf on the shelf near at hand, and washed it down with water from a tap, which he let run for some time before venturing to drink it. Even then he carefully wiped the tap both inside and outside before drinking. When he'd finished, he took a revolver from a locked drawer, inspecting the mechanism with attention to see that it was in working order, and loaded it with the new cartridges from an unbroken packet. Then he sat down to wait again. At 11:15, he rose and went out into the street. He walked briskly, keeping well away from the wall, till he came out into a well-lighted thoroughfare. Here he took a bus, securing the corner seat next to the conductor, from which he could see everybody who got on and off. A succession of buses eventually brought him to a respectable residential quarter of Hampstead. Here he alighted, and, still keeping well away from the walls, made his way up to the heath. The night was moonless, but not altogether black, and as he crossed a deserted part of the heath, he observed one or two other dark forms closing in upon him from various directions. He paused in the shelter of a large tree, and adjusted to his face a black velvet mask, which covered him from brow to chin. At its base, the number 21 was clearly embroidered in white thread. At length, a slight dip in the ground disclosed one of those agreeable villas which stand somewhat isolated among the rural surroundings of the heath. One of the windows was lighted. As he made his way to the door, other dark figures masked like himself pressed forward and surrounded him. He counted 6 of them. The foremost man knocked on the door of the solitary house. After a moment it was opened slightly. The man advanced his head to the opening. There was a murmur, and the door opened wide. The man stepped in, and the door was shut. When 3 of the men had entered, Rogers found himself to be the next in turn. He knocked 3 times loudly, then twice faintly. The door opened to the extent of 2 or 3 inches, and an ear was presented to the chink. Rogers whispered, "Finality." The ear was withdrawn, the door opened, and he passed in. Without any further word of greeting, number 21 passed into a small room on the left, which was furnished like an office, with a desk, a safe, and a couple of chairs. At the desk sat a massive man in evening dress, with a ledger before him. The new arrival shut the door carefully behind him. It clicked to on a spring lock. Advancing to the desk, he announced, "Number 21, sir," and stood respectfully waiting. The big man looked up, showing the number 1 startlingly white on his velvet mask. His eyes, of a curious hard blue, scanned Rogers attentively. At a sign from him, Rogers removed his mask. Having verified his identity with care, the president said, "Very well. Number 21. He made an entry in the ledger. The voice was hard and metallic like his eyes. The close scrutiny from behind the immovable black mask seemed to make Rogers uneasy. He shifted his feet. His eyes fell. Number 1 made a sign of dismissal, and Rogers, with a faint sigh as though of relief, replaced his mask and left the room. As he came out, the next comer passed in his place. The room in which the society met was a large one, made by knocking 2 of the largest of the first-floor rooms into one. It was furnished in the standardized taste of 20th-century suburbia, and brilliantly lighted. A gramophone in one corner blared out a jazz tune, to which about 10 couples of masked people were dancing, some in evening dress, and others in tweeds and jumpers. In one corner of the room was an American bar. Rogers went up and asked the man in charge for double whiskey. He consumed it slowly, leaning on the bar. The room filled. Presently somebody moved across to a gramophone and stopped it. He looked around. Number 1 had appeared on the threshold. A tall woman in black stood beside him. A mask embroidered with a white 2 covered hair and face completely. Only her fine bearing and her white arms and bosom and the dark eyes shining from the eye-slits proclaimed her a woman of power and physical attraction. "Ladies and gentlemen," Number 1 was standing at the upper end of the room. The woman sat beside him. Her eyes were cast down and betrayed nothing, but her hands were clenched on the arms of the chair, and her whole figure seemed tensely aware. "Ladies and gentlemen, our members are too short tonight." The masks moved. Eyes were turned, seeking and counting. "I need not inform you of the disastrous failure of our plan for securing the plans of the Count Windlesham helicopter. Our courageous and devoted comrades number 15 and number 48 were betrayed and taken by the police." An uneasy murmur rose among the company. "It may have occurred to some of you that even the well-known steadfast of these comrades may give way under examination, but there is no cause for alarm. The usual orders have been issued, and I have this evening received the report that their tongues have been effectively silenced. You will, I am sure, be glad to know that these 2 brave men have been spared the ordeal of so great a temptation to dishonour, and that they will not be called upon to face a public trial and the rigours of a long imprisonment." A hiss of intaken breath moved across the assembled members like wind over a barley field. "Their dependents will be discreetly compensated in the usual manner. I call upon numbers 12 and 34 to undertake this agreeable task. They will attend me in my office for their instructions after the meeting. Will the numbers I have named kindly signify they are able and willing to perform this duty?" 2 hands were raised in salute. The President continued, looking at his watch. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your partners for the next dance." The gramophone struck up again. Rogers turned to a girl near him in a red dress. She nodded, and they slipped into the movement of a foxtrot. The couples gyrated solemnly and in silence. Their shadows were flung across the blinds as they turned and stepped to and fro. "What's happened?" breathed the girl in a whisper, scarcely moving her lips. "I'm frightened, aren't you? I feel as if something awful's going to happen." "Does take one a bit short. The President's way of doing things," agreed Rogers. "But it is safer like that." "Those poor men!" A dancer, turning and following on their heels, touched Rogers on the shoulder. "No talking, please." His eyes gleamed sternly. He twirled his partner into the middle of the crowd and was gone. The girl shuddered. The gramophone stopped. There was a burst of clapping. The dancers again clustered before the President's seat. "Ladies and gentlemen, you may wonder why this extraordinary meeting has been called. The reason is a serious one. The failure of our recent attempt was no accident. The police were not on the premises that night by chance. We have a traitor among us." Partners who'd been standing close together fell distrustfully apart. Each member seemed to shrink as a snail shrinks from a touch of a finger. "You will remember the disappointing outcome of the Dinglewood affair. You may recall other small matters which have not turned out satisfactorily. All these troubles have been traced to their origin. I am happy to say that our minds can now be easy. The offender has been discovered, and will be removed. There will be no more mistakes. The misguided member who introduced the traitor to our society will be placed in a position where his lack of caution will have no further ill effects. There is no cause for alarm." Every eye roved around the company, searching for the traitor and his unfortunate sponsor. Somewhere beneath the black masks a face must have turned white. Somewhere under the stifling velvet there must have been a brow sweating, not with the heat of the dance. But the masks hid everything. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your partners for the next dance." The gramophone struck into an old and half-forgotten tune. "There ain't nobody loves me." The girl in red was claimed by a tall mask in evening dress. A hand was laid on Roger's arm, making him start, and a small plump woman in a green jumper slipped a cold hand into his. The dance went on. When it stopped, amid the usual applause, everyone stood detached, stiffened in expectation. The president's voice was raised again. "Ladies and gentlemen, please behave naturally. This is a dance, not a public meeting." Rogers led his partner to a chair and fetched her an ice. As he stooped over her, he noticed the hurried rise and fall of her bosom. "Ladies and gentlemen," the endless interval was over, "you will no doubt wish to be immediately relieved from suspense. I shall name the persons involved. Number 37. A man sprung up with a fearful, strangled cry. "Silence!" The wretch choked and gasped. I swear I never! I'm innocent! Silence! You have failed in discretion. You will be dealt with. If you have anything to say in defense of your folly, I will hear it later. Sit down." Number 37 sank down upon a chair. He pushed his handkerchief under the mask to wipe his face. Two tall men closed in upon him. The rest fell back, feeling the recoil of humanity from one stricken by mortal disease. The gramophone struck up. "Ladies and gentlemen, I will now name the traitor. Number 21, stand forward." Rogers stepped forward. The concentrated fear and loathing of 48 pairs of eyes burned upon him. The miserable Jukes set up a fresh wail. "Oh my God! Oh my God!" "Silence! Number 21, take off your mask." The traitor pulled the thick covering from his face. The intense hatred of the eyes devoured him. "Number 37, this man was introduced here by you under the name of Joseph Rogers, formerly second footman in the service of the Duke of Denver, dismissed for pilfering. Did you take steps to verify that statement?" "I did. As God's my witness, it was all straight. I had him identified by two of the servants. I made inquiries. The tale was straight. I'll swear it was." The president consulted a paper before him. Then he looked at his watch again. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your partners." Number 21, his arms twisted behind him and bound, and his wrists handcuffed, stood motionless, while the dance of doom circled about him. The clapping as it ended sounded like the clapping of the men and women who sat, thirsty-lipped, beneath the guillotine. "Number 21, your name was given as Joseph Rogers, footman, dismissed for theft. Is that your real name?" "No." "What is your name?" "Peter Dearth Breeden Whimsy." "We thought you were dead." "Naturally. You were intended to think so." "What has become of the genuine Joseph Rogers?" "He died abroad. I took his place. I may say that no real blame attaches to your people for not having realized who I was. I not only took Rogers' place, I was Rogers, even when I was alone. I walked like Rogers, I sat like Rogers. I read Rogers' books and wore Rogers' clothes. In the end, I almost thought Rogers' thoughts. The only way to keep up a successful impersonation is never to relax." "I see. The robbery of your own flat was arranged, obviously. The robbery of the Dowager Duchess, your mother, was connived at by you?" "It was. It was a very ugly tiara. No real loss to anybody with decent taste. May I smoke, by the way?" "You may not." "Ladies and gentlemen." The dance was like the mechanical jigging of puppets. Limbs jerked, feet faltered. The prisoner watched with an air of critical detachment. "Numbers 15, 22, and 49. You have watched the prisoner. Has he made any attempts to communicate with anybody?" "None." Number 22 was the spokesman. "His letters and parcels were opened, his telephone tapped, and his movements followed. His water pipes have been under observation for Morse signals." "You are sure of what you say?" "Absolutely." "Have you been alone in this adventure? Speak truth, or things will be made somewhat more unpleasant for you than they might otherwise be." "I have been alone. I have taken no unnecessary risks." "Maybe so. It will, however, be as well that steps should be taken to silence the man at Scotland Yard. What is his name? Parker. Also the prisoner's manservant, Mervyn Bunter, and possibly also his mother and sister. The brother is a stupid oaf, and not, I think, likely to have been taken into the prisoner's confidence. A precautionary watch will, I think, meet the necessities of his case." The prisoner appeared for the first time to be moved. "Sir, I assure you that my mother and sister know nothing which could possibly bring danger to the society." "You should have thought of their situation earlier. Ladies and gentlemen, please take—" "No!" Flesh and blood could endure the mockery no longer. "No! Finish with him. Get it over. Break up the meeting. It's dangerous. The police. Silence! The President glanced round the crowd. It had a dangerous look about it. He gave way. Very well. Take the prisoner away and silence him. He will receive number 4 treatment. Be sure you explain it to him carefully first. The eyes expressed a wolfish satisfaction. Strong hands gripped Whimsy's arm. One moment. For God's sake, let me die decently. You should have thought this over earlier. Take him away. Ladies and gentlemen, be satisfied. He will not die quickly. Stop! Wait! Cried Whimsy desperately. I have something to say. I don't ask for life, only a quick death. I have something to sell. To sell? Yes. We make no bargains with traitors. No, but listen. Do you think I've not thought of this? I'm not so mad. I have left a letter. Ah, now it is coming. A letter. To whom? To the police. If I do not return tomorrow, well, the letter will be opened. Sir, broke in number 15, the prisoner has not sent any letter. He's been strictly watched for many months. Ah, but listen. I left the letter before I came to Lambeth. Then it can contain no information of value. But it does. What? A combination of my safe. Indeed. Has this man's safe been searched? Yes, sir. What did it contain? No information of importance, sir. An outline of our organisation, the name of this house, but nothing that cannot be altered and covered before morning. Whimsy smiled. Did you investigate the inner compartment of the safe? There was a pause. You hear what he says? Did you find this inner compartment? There was no inner compartment, sir. He's trying to bluff. Well, I hate to contradict you, said Whimsy with an effort at his ordinary pleasant tone, but I really think you must have overlooked the inner compartment. Well, and what do you say is in this inner compartment, if it does exist? The names of every member of the society, with their addresses, photographs, and fingerprints. What? The eyes around him now were ugly with fear. Whimsy kept his face steadily turned towards the President. How do you say you have contrived to get this information? Well, I've been doing a little detective work on my own, you know. You have been watched. True. The fingerprints of my watchers adorn the first page of the collection. This statement can be proved. Certainly. I will prove it. The name of number 50, for example. Stop! A fierce muttering arose. The President silenced it with a gesture. If you mention names here, you will certainly have no hope of mercy. There is a 5th treatment, kept specially for people who mention names. Bring the prisoner to my office and keep the dance going. The President took an automatic from his hip pocket and faced his tightly fettered prisoner across the desk. Now, speak. I should put that thing away if I were you. It would be a much pleasanter form of death than treatment number 5. I might be tempted to ask for it. Ingenious, but a little too ingenious. Now be quick and tell me what you know. Will you spare me if I tell you? I make no promises. Be quick. Whimsy shrugged his bound and aching shoulders. Certainly I will tell you what I know. Stop me when you think you've heard enough. He leaned forward and spoke low. Overhead, the noise of the gramophone and the shuffling of the feet bore witness that the dance was going on. Stray passers-by crossing the heath noticed that the people in the lonely house were making a night of it again. Well, am I to go on? From beneath the mask, the President's voice sounded as though he were grimly smiling. My lord, your story fills me with regret that you are not, in fact, a member of our society. Wit, courage, and industry are valuable to an association like ours. I fear I cannot persuade you. No, I suppose not. He touched a bell on his desk. Ask the members kindly to proceed to the supper-room, he said to the mask who entered. The supper-room was on the ground floor, shuttered and curtained. Down its centre ran a long bare table, with chairs set about it. A Barmecide feast, I see, said Whimsy pleasantly. It was the first time he had seen this room. At the far end, a trap-door in the floor gaped ominously. The President took the head of the table. Ladies and gentlemen, he began as usual, and the foolish courtesy had never sounded so sinister. I will not conceal from you the seriousness of the situation. The prisoner has recited to me more than 20 names and addresses which were thought to be unknown, except to their owners and to me. There has been great carelessness, which will have to be looked into. Fingerprints have been obtained, and he has shown me photographs of some of them. How our investigators came to overlook the inner door of this safe is also a matter which calls for inquiry. Don't blame them, it was meant to be overlooked, you know. I made it like that on purpose. The president went on without seeming to notice the interruption. The prisoner informs me that the book with the names and addresses is to be found in this inner compartment, together with certain letters and papers stolen from the houses of members, and numerous objects bearing authentic fingerprints. I believe him to be telling the truth. He offers the combination of the safe in exchange for a quick death. I think the offer should be accepted. What is your opinion, ladies and gentlemen? The combination is known already, said number 22. Imbecile! This man has told us, and has proved to me that he is Lord Peter Wimsey. Do you think he will have forgotten to alter the combination? And then there is the secret of the inner door. If he disappears tonight and the police enter his house... I say, said a woman's rich voice, that the promise should be given and the information used, and quickly. Time is getting short. A murmur of agreement went round the table. You hear, said the president, addressing Wimsey. The society offers you the privilege of a quick death in return for the combination of the safe and the secret of the inner door. I have your word for it. You have. Thank you. And my mother and sister? If you, in your turn, will give us your word, you are a man of honour, that these women know nothing that could harm us, they shall be spared. Thank you, sir. You may rest assured upon my honour that they know nothing. I should not think of burdening any woman with such dangerous secrets, particularly those who are dear to me. Very well, it is agreed. Yes? A murmur of assent was given, though with less readiness than before. Then I am willing to give you the information you want. The word of the combination is unreliability. And the inner door? In anticipation of the visit of the police, the inner door, which might have presented difficulties, is open. Good. You understand that if the police interfere with our messenger, it would not help me, would it? It is a risk, said the president thoughtfully. But a risk I think we must take. Carry the prisoner down to the cellar. He can amuse himself by contemplating apparatus number 5. In the meantime, numbers 12 and 46... No, no! A sullen mutter of dissent arose and swelled threateningly. No, said a tall man with a voice like a treacle. Why should any members be put in possession of this evidence? We have found one traitor among us tonight, and more than one fool. How are we to know that numbers 12 and 46 are not fools and traitors too? The two men turned savagely upon the speaker, but a girl's voice struck into the discussion, high and agitated. Here, that's right, I say. How about us? We ain't going to have our names read by somebody we don't know nothing about. I've had enough of this. They might sell the whole lot of us to the narcs. I agree, said another member. Nobody ought to be trusted, nobody at all. The president shrugged his shoulders. Then what, ladies and gentlemen, do you suggest? There was a pause. Then the same girl shrilled out again. I say Mr. President ought to go himself. He's the only one who knows all the names. It won't be no cop to him. Why should we all take the risk and trouble and him sit at home and collar the money? Let him go himself. That's what I say. A long rustle of approbation went round the table. I second that motion, said a stout man who wore a bunch of gold seals at his fob. Wimsey smiled as he looked at the seals. It was that trifling vanity which had led him directly to the name and address of the stout man, and he felt a certain affection for the trinkets on that account. The president looked round. It is the wish of the meeting, then, that I should go? He said in an ominous voice. 45 hands were raised in approbation. Only the woman known as number 2 remained motionless and silent, her strong white hands clenched on the arm of a chair. The president rolled his eyes slowly round the threatening ring, till they rested upon her. Am I to take it that this vote is unanimous? The woman raised her head. Don't go, she gasped faintly. You hear? Said the president in a faintly derisive tone. This lady says, don't go. I submit that what number 2 says is neither here nor there, said the man with the treacly voice. Our own ladies might not like us to be going, if they were in Madam's privileged position." His voice was an insult. "Hear, hear," cried another man. "This is a democratic society, this is. We don't want no privileged classes." "Very well. You hear, number two. The feeling of a meeting is against you. Have you any reasons to put forward in favour of your opinion?" "100. The President is the head and soul of our society. If anything should happen to him, what should we be? You," she swept the company magnificently with her eyes, "you have all blundered. We have your carelessness to thank for all of this. Do you think we should be safe for 5 minutes if the President was not here to repair your follies?" "Well, there's something in that," said a man who had not hitherto spoken. "Pardon my suggesting," said Whimsy maliciously, "that as Our Lady appears to be in a position peculiarly favourable for the reception of the President's confidences, the contents of my modest volume will probably be no news to her. Why should not number two go herself?" "Because I say she must not," said the President sternly, checking the quick reply that rose to his companion's lips. "If it is the will of the meeting, I will go. Give me the key to the house." One of the men extracted it from Whimsy's jacket pocket and handed it over. "Is the house watched?" "No." "That is the truth." "It is the truth." The President turned at the door. "If I have not returned in 2 hours' time, act for the best to save yourselves, and do what you like with the prisoner. Number two will give orders in my absence." He left the room. Number two rose from her seat with a gesture of command. "Ladies and gentlemen, supper is now considered over. Start the dancing again." Down in the cellar the time passed slowly in the contemplation of apparatus number 5. The miserable Dukes, alternately wailing and raving, at length shrieked himself into exhaustion. The 4 members guarding the prisoners whispered together from time to time. "It's an hour and a half since the President left," said one. Whimsy glanced up, then returned to the examination of the room. There were many curious things in it, which he wanted to memorize. Presently the trap-door was flung open. "Bring him up!" Whimsy rose immediately, his face rather pale. The members of the gang were again seated round the table. Number two occupied the President's chair, and her eyes fastened on Whimsy's face with tigerish fury. But when she spoke, it was with a self-control which roused his admiration. "The President has been 2 hours gone. What has happened to him? Traitor twice over. What has happened to him?" "How should I know? Perhaps he has looked after number one and gone while the going was good." She sprang up with a little cry of rage and came close to him. "Beast! Liar!" She struck him in the mouth. "You know he would never do that. He is faithful to his friends. What have you done with him? Speak, or I will make you speak. You two there, bring the irons. He shall speak." "I can only form a guess, madame, and I shall not guess any better for being stimulated with hot irons, like Pantaloon at the circus. Calm yourself, and I will tell you what I think. I think, indeed I greatly fear, that Monsieur le Président, in his hurry to examine the interesting exhibits in my safe, may, quite inadvertently no doubt, have let the door of the inner compartment close behind him, in which case he raised his eyebrows, his shoulders being too sore for shrugging, and gazed at her with a limpid and innocent regret. "What do you mean?" Whimsy glanced round the circle. "I think I'd better begin from the beginning, by explaining to you the mechanism of my safe. It's a rather nice safe. I invented the idea myself. Not the principle of its working, of course, that's a matter for scientists, but just the idea of the thing. The combination I gave you is perfectly correct as far as it goes. It's a 3-alphabet, 13-letter lock by Bunn and Fishett, a very good one of its kind. It opens the outer door, leading into the ordinary strong-room where I keep my cash and my froth-blowers, cufflinks, and all that. But there is an inner compartment with 2 doors, which open in quite a different manner. The outermost of these 2 inner doors is merely a thin steel skin, painted to look like the back of the safe, and fitting closely so as not to betray any joy. It lies on the same plane as the wall of the room, you understand, so if you were to measure the outside and inside of the safe, you would discover no discrepancy. It opens outwards with an ordinary key, and, as I truly assured the President, it was left open when I quitted my flat. Do you think that the President is so simple as to be caught in such obvious a trap? He will have wedged open the inner door, undoubtedly. Undoubtedly, madame. But the sole purpose of that outer inner door, if I may express myself so, is to appear to be the only inner door. But hidden behind the hinge of that door is another door, a sliding panel set so closely in the thickness of the wall that you would hardly see it unless you knew it was there. This door was also left open. Our revered number one had nothing to do but to walk straight through into the inner compartment of the safe, which, by the way, is built into the chimney of an old basement kitchen which runs up the house at that point. I hope I make myself clear. Yes, get on! Make your story short! Whimsy bowed, and speaking with even greater deliberation than ever, resumed. Now, this interesting list of the Society's activities, which I've had the honour of compiling, is written in a very large book, bigger even than Monsieur le Président's ledger, which he uses downstairs. I trust, by the way, madame, that you have borne in mind the necessity of putting that ledger in a safe place. Apart from the risk of investigation by some officious policeman, it would be inadvisable that any junior member of the Society should get hold of it. The feeling of a meeting would, I fancy, be opposed to such an occurrence. It is secure, she answered hastily. And do get on with your story. Thank you. You've relieved my mind. Very good. This big book lies on a steel shelf at the back of the inner compartment. Just a moment. I have not described this inner compartment to you. It's 6 feet high, 3 feet wide, and 3 feet deep. One can stand up in it quite comfortably, unless one's very tall. It suits me nicely, as you may see. I'm not more than 5 feet 8 1/2. The President has the advantage of me in height. He may be a little cramped, but there'd be room for him to squat, if he grows tired of standing. By the way, I don't know if you know it, but you've tied me up rather tightly. I would have you tied till all your bones were locked together. Beat him, you! He is trying to gain time. If you beat me, I'm damned if I'll speak at all. Control yourself, madame. It does not do to move hastily when your king is in check. Get on! She cried again, stamping with rage. Well, where was I? Oh, yes, the inner compartment. As I say, it's a little snug. The more so that it's not ventilated in any way. Now, did I mention that the book lay on a steel shelf? Yes, you did. Yes. The steel shelf is balanced on a very delicate concealed spring. When the weight of the book, a heavy one, as I said, is lifted, the shelf rises almost imperceptibly. In rising, it makes an electrical contact. Imagine to yourself, our revered President steps in, propping the false door open behind him. He sees the book. Quickly he snatches it up. To make sure it's the right one, he opens it and studies the pages. He looks about for the other objects I've mentioned, which bear the marks of fingerprints. And silently, but very, very quickly, you can imagine it, can you not? The secret panel released by the rising of the shelf leaps across like a panther behind him. Rather a trite simile, but apt, don't you think? My God, my God! Her hand went up as though to tear the choking mask from her face. You devil! Devil! What is the word that opens the inner door? Quick! I will have it torn out of you! The word! Well, it's not a hard word to remember, though it has been forgotten before now. Do you recollect, when you were a child, being told the tale of Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves? When I had that door made, my mind reverted, with rather a pretty touch of sentimentality, in my opinion, to the happy hours of my childhood. The words that open the door are, "Open Sesame." How long can a man live in this devil's trap of yours? Oh, I should think he might hold out a few hours if he kept cool and didn't use up the available oxygen by shouting and hammering. If we went there at once, I dare say we should find him fairly all right. I shall go myself. Take this man. Do your worst with him. Do not finish him till I come back. I want to see him die. One moment, said Whimsy. I think you'd better take me with you. Why? Because, you see, I'm the only person who can open it. You have given me the word? Was that a lie? No, the word's all right. But you see, it's one of these new-style electric doors. In fact, it's really the very latest thing indoors. I'm rather proud of it. It opens to the words "Open Sesame," all right, but to my voice only. Your voice? I will choke your voice with my own hands. What do you mean, your voice only? Just what I say. Don't clutch my throat like that, or you may alter my voice so the door won't recognize it. That's better. It's apt to be rather pernickety about voices. It got stuck up for a week once when I had a cold and could only implore it in a hoarse whisper. Even in the ordinary way, I sometimes have to try several times before I hit on the exact right intonation. She turned and appealed to a short, thick-set man standing beside her. Is it true? Is it possible? Well, perfectly, ma'am, I'm afraid, said the man civilly. From his voice, Whimsy took him to be a superior workman of some kind, probably an engineer. Is it an electrical device? You understand it? Oh, yes, ma'am. It'll have a microphone arrangement somewhere that converts the sound into a series of vibrations, controlling an electric needle. When the needle has traced the correct pattern, the circuit's completed and the door opens. The same thing can be done by light vibrations equally easily. Couldn't you open it with tools? In time, ma'am, yes, but only by smashing the mechanism, which is probably well protected. You may take that for granted. She put her hands to her head. I'm afraid we're done in, said the engineer with a kind of respect in his tone for a good job of work. No, wait. Somebody must know. The workman who made this thing. In Germany, said Whimsy briefly. Oh, yes, I have it. A gramophone. This, he, shall be made to say the word for us. Quick, how can it be done? It's not possible, ma'am. Where should we get the apparatus at 3:30 on a Sunday morning? The poor gentleman would be dead long before. There was a silence, during which the sounds of awakening day came through the shuttered windows. A motor horn sounded distantly. I give in. We must let him go. Take the ropes off him. You will free him, won't you? She went on, turning piteously to Whimsy. Devil as you are, you're not such a devil as that. You will go straight back and save him? Let him go nothing, broke in one of the men. He doesn't go to peach to the police, my lady, don't you think it. The president's done in, that's all, and we'd better make tracks while we can. It's all up, boys. Chuck this fellow down the cellar and fasten him in so he can't make a row and wake the place up. I'm going to destroy the ledgers. You can see it done if you don't trust me. And you, 30, you know where the switch is. Give us a quarter of an hour to clear, and then you can blow this place to glory. No, you cannot go. You cannot leave him to die. Your president, your leader, I won't let it happen. Set this devil free. Help me, one of you, with the ropes. None of that now, said the man who'd spoken before. He caught her by the wrists, and she twisted, shrieking in his arms, biting and struggling to get free. Think, said the man with the treacly voice. It's getting on to morning. It'll be light in an hour or two. The police may be here any minute. The police? She seemed to control herself by violent effort. Yes, you're right. We must not imperil the safety of all for the sake of one. He would not wish that. That is so. We will put this carrion in the cellar where it cannot harm us, and depart, every one to his own place, while there is time. And the other prisoner? He, poor fool, he can do no harm. He knows nothing. Let him go, she answered contemptuously. In a few minutes' time, Whimsy found himself bundled unceremoniously into the depths of the cellar. He was a little puzzled. That they had refused to let him go, even at the price of number one's life, he could understand. He'd taken the risk with his eyes open. But that they should leave him as a witness seemed incredible. The man who'd taken him down strapped his ankles together and departed, switching the lights out as they went. Hi, comrade. It's a bit lonely sitting here. You might leave a light on. It's all right, my friend. You'll not be in the dark long. They've set the time fuse. The other man laughed with rich enjoyment, and they went out together. So that was it. He was to be blown up with the house. In that case, the president would certainly be dead before he was extricated. This worried Whimsy. He would rather have been able to bring the big crook to justice. After all, Scotland Yard had been waiting 6 years to break up this gang. He waited, straining his ears. It seemed to him that he heard footsteps over his head. The gang had all crept out by this time. There was certainly a creak. The trapdoor had opened. He felt, rather than heard, somebody creeping into the cellar. Hush, said a voice in his ear. Soft hands passed over his face and went fumbling about his body. There came the cold touch of steel on his wrists. The rope slackened and dropped off. A key clicked in the handcuffs. The strap about his ankles was unbuckled. Quick! They've set the time switch. The house is mine. Follow me as fast as you can. I stole back. I said I'd left some jewellery. Oh, it was true. I left it on purpose. He must be saved. Only you can do it. Make haste. Whimsy, staggering with pain as the blood rushed back into his bound and numbed arms, crawled after her into the room above. A moment, and she'd flung back the shutters and thrown the window open. "Now go! Release him! You promise?" "I promise. And I warn you, madame, that this house is surrounded. When my safe door closed, it gave a signal which sent my servant to Scotland Yard. Your friends are all taken." "But you go! Never mind me! Quick! Time is almost up." "Come away from this!" He caught her by the arm, and they went running and stumbling across the little garden. An electric torch shone suddenly in the bushes. "That you, Parker? Get your fellows away, quick! The house is going to go up in a minute." The garden seemed suddenly full of shouting, hurrying men. Whimsy, floundering in the darkness, was brought up violently against the wall. He made a leap at the coping, caught it, and hoisted himself up. His hands groped for the woman. He swung her up beside him. They jumped. Everyone was jumping. The woman caught her foot and fell with a gasping cry. Whimsy tried to stop himself, tripped over a stone, and came down headlong. Then, with a flash and a roar, the night went up in fire. Whimsy picked himself painfully out from among the debris of the garden wall. A faint moaning near him proclaimed that his companion was still alive. A lantern was turned suddenly upon him. "Here you are," said a cheerful voice. "You all right, old thing? Good Lord, what a hairy monster!" "All right, only a bit winded. Is the lady safe?" Arm broken, apparently. Otherwise sound. What's happened?" "About half a dozen of them got blown up. The rest we've bagged." Whimsy became aware of a circle of dark forms in the wintry dawn. "Good Lord, what a day! What a comeback for a public character! You old stinker, to let us go on for 2 years thinking you were dead. I bought a bit of black for an armband, I did really." "Did nobody know, besides Bunter?" "Only my mother and sister. I put it in a secret trust, you know, the thing you send to executors and people. We shall have an awful time with the lawyers, I'm afraid, proving it's me. Hello, is that friend Sugg?" "Yes, my lord," said Inspector Sugg, grinning and nearly weeping with excitement. "Damn glad to see your lordship again. Fine piece of work, your lordship. They're all waiting to shake hands with you, sir." "Oh, Lord, I wish I could get washed and shaved first. Awfully glad to see you all again after 2 years' exile in Lambeth. Been a good little show, hasn't it?" "Is he safe?" Whimsy started at the agonized cry. "Good Lord, I forgot the gentleman in the safe. Here, fetch a car, quickly. I've got the great big top Moriarty of the whole bunch quietly asphyxiating at home. Here, hop in. Put this lady in, too. I promised we'd get back and save him. Though," he finished the sentence in Parker's ear, "there may be murder charges, too, and I wouldn't give much for his chance at the Old Bailey. Whack her up. He can't last much longer, shut up there. He's the bloke you're wanting, the man at the back of the Morrison case and the Hope Wilmington case, and hundreds of others." The cold morning had turned the streets grey when they drew up before the door of the house in Lambeth. Whimsy took the woman by the arm and helped her out. The mask was off now and showed her face, haggard and desperate and white with fear and pain. "Russian, eh?" whispered Parker in Whimsy's ear. "Something of the sort. Damn, the front door's blown shut, and the blighter's got the key with him in the safe. Hop through the window, will you?" "Right." Parker bundled obligingly in, and in a few seconds threw open the door to them. The house seemed very still. Whimsy led the way to the back room where the strong room stood. The outer door and the second door stood propped open with chairs. The inner door faced them like a blank green wall. "Only hope he hasn't upset the adjustment with thumping at it." The anxious hand on his arm clutched feverishly. He pulled himself together, forcing his tone to one of cheerful commonplace. "Come on, old thing," he said, addressing himself conversationally to the door. "Show us your paces. Open sesame." "Confound you! Open sesame." The green door suddenly slid away into the wall. The woman sprang forward and caught in her arms the humped and senseless thing that rolled out from the safe. Its clothes were torn to ribbons, and its battered hands dripped blood. "It's all right," said Whimsy. "It's all right. He'll live to stand his trial."
Hi, so this is the part of the podcast where I say something about my thoughts and reactions to the story. The story was, of course, The Adventurous Exploit of the Cave of Ali Baba by Dorothy L. Sayers, and it was read by Matthew Jones, MJam of London. So our guest narrator is the talented Matthew Jones, known for his captivating voice and dynamic range, and I know from reading the comments he has a lot of fans on YouTube. So he is a great character actor in many ways. No, not in many ways, only in the many ways that he does the characters. So he managed to voice all those different people and bring them alive as separate characters to my ears. I thought it was a great talent. He has, in the show notes, you'll see that I put links to his websites where you can find his stuff. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the story. The story is by Dorothy L. Sayers, first published in 1928 as part of her collection Lord Peter Views the Body. The collection features, as you will know, Lord Peter Wimsey in this collection in a series of short stories that blend mystery, adventure, and her characteristic wit, which is a very important part of these stories, I think. This story stands out for its unique plot and inventive elements, showcasing Sayers' skill in crafting engaging and intricate narratives. It's the fourth story in the Lord Peter Wimsey series, if you lay them all out chronologically. And actually, when I was doing my research for the note, I found there's a site that does that and sets out all the stories and sets out Lord Peter's life and finds some inconsistencies, but that's probably true because, I mean, if you write that many stories, the authors often, this is very common for authors to be caught out by very attentive, if not obsessed, readers. Okay, so Dorothy L. Sayers, her self was born in 1893, died in 1957. She's best known for a detective fiction featuring the erudite and charming amateur sleuth Lord Peter Wimsey. I would say he's also very funny. Born in Oxford, she was one of the first women to graduate from Oxford University, earning a degree in modern languages. This isn't the first of the Sayers stories, Wimsey stories we've done. Sayers' literary career spanned various genres, including translation of Dante's Divine Comedy, because she was a linguist, plays and essays, but it was her mystery novels and short stories that gained her widespread acclaim. Her work is celebrated for its intricate plots, rich characterization, and incisive social commentary. I think that's really interesting. She was a co-founder of the Detection Club and a pal of Agatha Christie in the Detection Club. But whether they were close friends or just work colleagues, in a sense, it's hard to know. So I think her clever use of language and ironic observations provide a layer of enjoyment for the reader. Wimsey is a funny man, and it's more like the Lavender Hill Mob. This story is like the British black and white crime movies of the 50s, which were never about, I've said this many times, modern crime seems to be the grimmer the better. Let's throw a few taboos in and shock us. So if we, you know what the things I'm talking about. I'm not even going to mention them. If you can have a taboo, it's not just stealing a jewel now. It then became murder. And then it wasn't just murder. It was serial killers. And then it was kind of sexual stuff. And, and inevitably that's what you get in these modern thing. The person who's doing is absolutely deviant, whereas this is it is of its age, and it doesn't have that grimness to it, and it is more light-hearted because we might look at the damage done from a theft, which, if you've ever been burgled or been robbed, is not very nice, but it's not as bad as multiply murdering people. And so I think that allows us to take the crimes with more levity. So the fascinating element of this story is a voice-activated safe with a hidden compartment, showcasing a piece of technology remarkably advanced for the 1920s. This intricate mechanism not only adds suspense, but also underscores the intellectual ingenuity required in both criminal activities and detective work. In common with many stories, there is a denouement, an expose of the intricacies. So Golden Age stuff like this very often features a very, very clever person. Now, I'm reminded later, if you jump forward to the 70s, you think of Frederick Forsyth and The Day of the Jackal and things like that. One of the things that really became of the rage in the 70s was these kind of stories that, like Frederick Forsyth, does intricate research. So not only are you having a thriller story in that case? You're learning stuff. That you learn about international this, that, the other, or wine tasting. So I think people do enjoy this kind of puzzle, this complexity, and a feeling that they're learning something in a story. We are perhaps less impressed by the technology, but remember, this is 1928. When you look into the research and reviews of this story, there are two things that crop up, and one is the role of the social position of the different people, the working classes versus the Lord Peter Wimsey, who's an aristocrat, and the other is the role of women. And I think this is particularly highlighted by the fact that Dorothy L. Sayers was a woman, the first to be granted her degree, and so she was a bit of a cutting-edge woman in the advancement of women's rights, I suppose. Now, I think the danger is that we can look back at these things through our own lenses, and every age does this. So when we look back, it is possible that we find things that neither Dorothy L. Sayers or her contemporary readers would have picked up on because of our particular sensitivities from where we are in history. In terms of women, she actually wrote an article called Are Women Human? And in this, she makes the claim that men and women should be valued for their abilities and contributions, irrespective of gender, race, or social class. How about that? So that doesn't seem particularly remarkable to us, but it does tie in with the what they call the first wave of feminism, which is about women getting the votes and women improving their position in terms of how the state views them. It was done in England in I'm not sure it was the whole of the UK, but certainly in England. The 1918 Representation of the People Act granted voting rights to women over the age of 30 who met minimum property qualifications. We should note that that one had granted this act extended the vote to all men over the age of 21 and to male military personnel over the age of 19. So for a man in 1918, you didn't have to own property. That had, in 1832, they were excluded if they didn't have property. And the 1867 Act, in urban areas, some men who didn't have property were extended. And the 1884 Act extended the vote to rural working class men, not women. 1918 is the first look in that women get, and only if they have a certain social standard, if we measure that with money. In 1928, the year that this story was published, this act, the Representation of the People Equal Franchise Act, extended voting rights to all women over 21, irrespective of property ownership. So we note that it's women over 21, men over 21, but male military personnel, not female military personnel, over 19. And so when we look at this story, we see that number 2 is actually a woman. And is that a product of the fact it's Dorothy L. Sayers wrote this, and would a male writer have written a woman as such a prominent character? I don't think that, it's hard to say, but probably not. It's probably because she is a woman. And this woman, I'm not sure she's a complex character. When you read these reviews, they talk about her being a complex character. I'm not sure she's particularly complex. In fact, I'm not sure many of the characters are complex. Lord Peter Wimsey becomes more complex and more emotionally nuanced as the stories go on. But otherwise, they are pretty much paper cuts, aren't they? Cookie cutters, I think they say. Gingerbread men. No, they don't say that. So, and then the issue about the servants and the working classes, and clearly this is important to know who's a gentleman and who isn't a gentleman, and who can pass for a gentleman, because I think she makes the point at the beginning that Rogers, who is in fact Wimsey, which kind of underlines his brilliance, like Sherlock Holmes, at disguising himself. This was a big deal, particularly in Victorian stories. Disguising was all the thing. They really loved disguises. But he is so good, he is able to position Rogers as a man who aspires to be a gentleman or appear as a gentleman, but doesn't cut. So he could be a footman who's come into a legacy, but probably not a butler, who would be better. So this complex social stratification is something that would be very familiar to readers. And I think the English class system is alive and well. But I wonder if it can be compared with the Indian caste system. People know where they are from all sorts of little clues, particularly in those days. But is she making a political point? I don't think she is. I don't think she is saying anything about that the working classes should be downtrodden. In that essay, she doesn't seem to think that. I think she's just reflecting the unreflected attitudes of the time. My dad, my stepdad, was born in 1932, had attitudes which would be considered sexist, racist, classist, and they were like the goldfish water that the goldfish swims in. He didn't reflect on them. They were just the accepted things. And I think when we look back, we say this time and time again with these kind of stories, we look back from our age with our eyes and we say, oh no, that's well, we usually say it's wrong. But even if we're not saying it's wrong, we notice it jumps out. But to them, it wasn't. It was just like saying, what do you call that? I call it a teapot. It's just what it is, It isn't. I remember teaching when I was a teacher for a bit, and I used to teach Welsh, so I was teaching languages. And people who are monoglot, they look at a dog and they go, "That's a dog." People who have more than one language look at it and go, "No, it's perro, it's chien, it's qui, it's mother, it's it's dog, it's hunt." It's all these things. It's just a sound that's attached to it. But if you only have one, you tend to think, maybe I'm wrong here, but you tend to think dog is what that is. Dog, that is what it is. Whereas in fact, it's just what you call it. And you may not always call it that. Of course, the etymology of the word dog is really interesting because hound is the proper. So hound is clearly German Hund, but it is related to the canine in the Latin, because k in Germanic went to be h and then softened to h. So you often get a correspondence of initial C in Latin and in many other languages. So key in Welsh from a Celtic kunos, dog, and probably from kundos. So you can see how hund, you can see how it comes anyway. So I get carried away with all this. But that's just what it's called. Oh, yes, so dog. So how did dog come in? Nobody really knows. And if you look on the internet, I'm not going to go into this now, there are loads of really interesting ideas about where the word dog came from, but nobody's proved it. I don't even think there's a settled consensus on it. Anyway, that's got nothing to do with Lord Peter Wimsey. So I probably said all I want to say about that. I just want to thank Matthew Jones as well for his narration and his wonderful bringing to life all these characters. I hope you enjoyed the story. Please spread the word about the Detective Channel, and I'll see you again soon.